June 1st, 2021, and I'm talking about Spiritism. As always, I live stream Sundays and Tuesdays, and today we're talking on chapter 20. We've been going through this for quite a few weeks in the wonderful book, A Wander in the Spirit Land by the Spirit Franchezzo, transcribed by the medium A. Farnese. Franchezzo's been in the lower zone. He's been helped to rise from the lower zone by this wonderful woman who is still in the physical world and still praying for him and meditating for him, and meets him in medium meetings and kind of communicates roughly with him. So he's helped it elevate him. He's been now part of a kind of a brotherhood, kind of a what you call an NGO, non-government organization within the spirit world, to help spirits where he was, right? Just kind of like Alcoholics Anonymous. Who mostly leads those meetings and helps other people? Well, ex-alcoholics. This is how the spirit world works. Think of all these things, how some things are mundane and like the earth, and some things are just fantastic, like thought is action in the spirit world. So they have people who have recently risen out of this lower zone. He calls it hell. It's really a type of purgatory. And when he says a hell, it's what the Spiritism calls the dark abyss, which is below the surface of the earth. From the surface to the first level of heaven is the lower zone, not as bad as the dark abyss. But even when what he calls hell, there's no punishment that's eternal. People are saved when they're ready to be, when they want to change their mind. And this is he is part of a group that went down. Now he's actually, I think, being sent on his own now to go through the cities and find people that want help, and he'll lead them to a station in whatever zone they're in, or maybe a little higher zone, to start their trek back up in the spirit world, to go back up and ascend spiritually. Pay for all your past wrong. It's not an easy thing. That's why it says, Jesus said, forgive 70 times 70. Try and be as good a person as you can. No one's expects perfection, but try and be as good as you can in this life. Okay, now let's go over and start chapter 20. Set this up. In the Imperial city. Chapter 20. We were now traversing a wide causeway of black marble, on either side of which were deep, dark chasms, of which it was impossible to see the bottom from the great clouds of heavy vapor that hung over them. Passing and repassing us on the highway were a great many dark spirits, some bearing great heavy loads upon their backs, others almost crawling along on all fours like beasts. Great gangs of slaves passed us, wearing heavy iron collars on their necks and linked together by a heavy chain. Now, this I have read. Now, Farnese is not a spiritist medium, and Franchezzo is not talks about spiritism in this book, but this is what I have read from other spiritist mediums, and also even what Allan Kardec alluded to, that the hell, which we think is, how can you have eternal punishment and be, damned forever? Well, you're not damned forever, but you're only that way, and you're in this slave gang, right? This chain gang, I should say. Why you still are the attitude and character that you have. If you spent your life taking advantage of other people and cheating other people and being criminal, all those things, guess what? You go to a place where there's others like you. And some of these people who think that they were really like leaders of gangs and leaders of criminal enterprises, well, they may be one of those slaves with those heavy iron collars. Why? Because they haven't the experience. They are taken just as soon as they passed away. And maybe they don't have the force of mind, the force of will. You have to have an iron force to be one of these leaders, these kind of not very nice leaders. Spiritism doesn't like to use the word evil. They like to use the word ignorant, right? Because these people are not doing good things because they're ignorant of what really is good. So this happens. This is why when people commit crime, and there's a victim, they hurt the victim, yes, but the real crime they're committing is against what's going to happen. They're committing crime against themselves. They are going to pay a heavy price. That's why I always tell people, don't worry about trying to I need to get back at this person or get revenge, or that's, leave all that. That's not for you. Because first of all, who knows what you did in the past? And if they did something to you, better think about it, because you probably did something like that to somebody else, and now you're getting the full brunt of what it felt like. And second of all, the spirit world will take care of putting them through the trials and tribulations they need to learn what they did wrong. And then you think about this for a bit. Of all these people have done things wrong, and then other people are doing wrong things to them, and this goes on and on and on. And yeah, it's very complicated. It's coming to an end. We are starting from a plan of atonement, where we are now, where you pay for your past wrongs, to become a plan of regeneration. These people who are still down here in the dark abyss, and these people even in the physical on earth, who were not and are not nice people, there'll come a time in the near future. Now, when I say near future, 1,000 years maybe sooner than that. So near future in spirit time, maybe not our time. Our time near future is like tomorrow, but those people will not be allowed on earth. That's where you're going to have the planet regeneration. You're going to have mostly good people. There'll still be some, people not too good, but they'll learn. So that's what's coming up. They were coming from the second, I'll restart. They were coming from the second or inner gate of what was evidently a large fortified city, whose dark buildings loomed through the dense masses of dark fog in front of us. The causeway, the style of buildings, and the appearance of many of the spirits made me feel as though we were entering some ancient fortified city of the old Roman Empire. Only here, everything gave one the sense of being foul and horrible, in spite of the fine architecture and the magnificent buildings, whose outlines we could dimly trace. The second gateway was finer in appearance than the first, and the gates being open, we passed in with a stream of spirits hurrying through it, as before we seemed to pass unseen. You will perceive, said faithful friend, that's the person that's accompanying him, that here there is a life in no way different from the earthly life of such a city at the time, when the one of which this is the spiritual reflection was in the full zenith of power, and when the particles of which this is formed were thrown off from its material life and drawn down by the force of attraction to form the city and these buildings, fit dwellings for the spiritual inhabitants. And you will see in the more modern appearance of many of the buildings and inhabitants how it has been added to from time to time by the same process which is going on continuously. So what is he saying? So you had these people who are not nice people, who were drawn down into this dark abyss, and their thoughts said, well, this is what the city should look like. So it took on the appearance of Rome at that time, let's say 2,000, maybe 2,500 years ago, 1,500 years ago. Rome was still around. And so their thoughts attracted, and they thought of the architecture, and it attracted that type of architecture. And then as more inhabitants came down there, as he said, you'll see more modern appearance. Well, they think of those things. Now, those buildings aren't perfect because they're not, these spirits are a bit warped. And first of all, they don't look that good, because when you're in spirit form, you look as you are internal on earth. In fact, there's a story in one of the books by Andre Luis talking about this beautiful woman who went to sleep. And then when she was fully asleep, her spirit came out of her body. And her spirit was ugly. She was just not a nice person at all. I've known people like that, unfortunately. They're not a nice person at all. She's just an ugly person. And of course, but she was inhabiting this body of this really beautiful woman at the time. But when she's in the spirit world, you cannot fool anybody. You reflect of what you are internally. Now, when you go to heaven, you reflect what you think you look like. So you'll look younger. And like if I go to heaven or close to that, Hopefully I'll have more hair, right? I'll look younger, all that. But that for a good person. But if you're kind of in the criminal section, you will be a bit warped, and you will not be look as perfect because you will reflect what you are on the inside. Okay, let me carry on. You will notice that most of the spirits here fancy themselves still in their earthly counterpart and wonder why all looks so dark and foul and dingy. Now, let me just stop there for a second. A lot of people that come into the cities in hell and the lower zone are even on the face of the earth. They don't know they're dead. I've encountered these people. I'm not a medium, but in medium meetings, I sit back on the wall and listen in. And since you still feel yourself, and you might look a little bit different if you can look in a mirror, but you still think you're there. But then when you go to your house, if you're still on the surface of the earth and no one pays attention to you, it's very strange. So, in like matter, the same city has a spiritual prototype in the higher spheres to which all that was fair and good and noble in its life has been attracted, and where those spirits who were good and true have gone to dwell. For in the lives of cities as of men, the spiritual emanations are attracted upwards or downwards, according as there is good or evil in the deeds done in them. And as the deeds done in this city have evil far exceeded those which were good, so this city is far larger, far more thickly peopled in this sphere than in those above. In the ages to come, when the spirits who are here now shall have progressed, that heavenly counterpart will be fully finished and fully peopled, and then will this place we gaze at now have crumbled into dust and faded from this sphere. So when there's no people there who are thinking bad thoughts, have done bad deeds, and then it's no longer in their mind, right? Even though I say there's no corruption, there's no decay in the spirit world, but things, when he said crumbled in the dust, it's like when people stop thinking about it because everything is held together by willpower, and when there's no one holding that city together because they're all gone and they're far beyond that, it's going to fade away. Let me carry on. We were now in a narrow street, such as it must have been in the earthly city, and a short distance farther brought us into a large square, surrounded with magnificent palaces, while before us towered one more splendid in design than all the others. A great wide flight of marble steps led up to its massive portico, and looming through the dark, cloudy atmosphere, we could trace its many wings and buildings. All was truly on a magnificent scale, yet all to my eyes appeared dark, stained with great splashes of blood, and covered with slimy fungus growth, which disfigured the magnificence and hung in great repulsive-looking festoons, like twisted snakes, from all the pillars and copestones of the buildings. Black slimy mud oozed up through the crevices of the marble pavement, as though the city floated upon a foul swamp, and noisome vapors curled up from the ground and floated above and around us in fantastic and horrible smoke wreaths, like the huge phantoms of past crimes. Everywhere were dark spirits crawling across the great square, in and out of the palace doors, driven onward by others stronger. Excuse me. Dark spirits with lash or spear. So they had a whole force there, an armed force, which they have in the cities of hell, in the dark abyss. They have soldiers, so they can fight each other's cities, they can fight within the cities. It's all pandemonium a lot of the times. This organization, because these people are really, they by their dominant will, but then people are always trying to get them out of power, and other people replace their power. It's like history condensed, as far as the power struggles. Let me get a drink real quick. Such cries of execration as we broke forth from time to time, such fearful oaths and such curses and imprecations. It was truly the pandemonium of the lost souls in the infernal regions. And all over all hung those black nights, clouds of sorrow and suffering and wrong. Far away to the earth, my thoughts traveled back to the days of the Roman Empire, and I saw reflected as in a glass the city in all the splendor of her power and in all the iniquities of her tyranny and her crimes, weaving down below from the loom of fate this other place of retribution for all those men and women who disgraced her beauties by their sins. I saw this great city of hell building atom by atom till it become a great prison for all the evil spirits of that wicked time. Now, when these people did great crimes and did great wrongs, let's say they were part of the Roman Empire. Let me give you two examples. When they did this, and let's say they would come down to the city. Now, in this dark abyss, the people who think they're in charge just because Jesus Christ lets them think they're in charge, right? It's like letting the prisoners run the prison because, after all, they deserve to be there. And, they're getting what they put out. But they certainly have no control over when people incarnate again. So let's say you were a Roman senator and you enslaved and you treated your slaves horribly. You treated everyone else horribly. You probably go down to the city like this, but in your next life, you may be disfigured. You may be a beggar in some dirty street in Rome. There was another example in one of the books by Chico Xavier, Psychograph by Andre Luis. No, actually, this was by Yvonne Pierre, Memoirs of Suicide. And this one man who was a Roman general, and he, enslaved cities and, people he conquered. He was a very successful general. They didn't ever say his name. He ended up, his next life, he was a slave. So there's no karma. There's no getting away from karma. And people who think, and this is why it's important to really think about the truth of reincarnation. Because reincarnation is the driver, right? And karma is like the steering wheel. Karma is like, okay, what road you're going to go on, and you have no choice but to move forward, and you're going to go through trials and tribulations. Okay, me carry on. We went up the wide flight of steps through the lofty doorway and found ourselves in the outer court of the emperor's palace. No one spoke to us or seemed aware of our presence, and we passed on through several smaller halls till we reached the door of the president's chamber. Here my companion stopped and said, "I cannot enter with you, friend, because I've already visited the dark spirit who reigns here, and therefore my presence would at once excite his suspicions and defeat the object of your visit, which is that you may rescue an unhappy spirit whose repentant prayers have reached the higher spheres and will be answered by the help you are sent to give him. You will find the person you seek without any difficulty. His desire for help has already drawn us thus near to him and will draw you still closer. I must now for a time part from you because I have my own path of work to follow. But we shall meet again ere long. And if you but keep a stout heart and a strong will, and do not forget the warnings given to you, no harm can befall you. Adieu, my friend, and know that I shall also need all my powers." So think about what it means. So there's a spirit down in this horrible city, but he's been by the law of affinity, being like with like, right? By being with just as rotten SOBs as he was, or then he's decided, oh, I don't like this. I don't like being with people like me. It's kind of the opposite of the golden rule, right? People do to you what you've done to them. So now, but this is where God and Jesus are all loving. This is why they're not here for punishment. They're here for you to experience what you need to experience in order for you to change your character and your attitude. That is the great lesson. And this is why you're on earth, because on earth, and you're in this physical body, you're much more affected by stimuli. Okay, I'll carry on. Thus then I parted from faithful friend and passed out alone into the council chamber, which I found thronged with spirits, both men and women, and furnished with all the barbaric splendor of the days of the emperors. Yet to my sight there was over everything the same stamp of foul loathsomeness which had struck me in the exterior of the palace. The men and women, haughty patricians in their lives, no doubt appeared to be eaten up with a loathsome disease like lepers, only they were even more horrible to look upon. The walls and floor seemed stained with dark pools of blood and hung with evil thoughts for drapery. Worm-eating and corrupting were the stately robes these haughty spirits wore, and saturated with the diseased germs from their corrupted bodies. Now, I'd like to say something is, these people, when they look at each other, they think they look fine. But Franchezzo sees them from the point of view of a higher spirit, and he sees them as they are, whereas they see themselves like, I look good, right? They will see the darkness of the place, but they don't see themselves as these foul lepers. They see themselves as not bad. But of course, he, being a higher level, sees them spiritually. I'll carry on. On a great throne sat the emperor himself, the most foul and awful example of degraded intellect and manhood in all that vast crowd of degraded spirits, while stamped upon his features was such a look of cruelty and vice that beside him the others sank into insignificance by comparison. I could not but admire, even while it revolted me, the majestic power of this man's intellect and will, the kingly sense of power over even such a motley crew as these, the feeling that even in hell he reigned as if by right, seemed to minister to his pride and love of dominion even in the midst of his awful surroundings. Looking at him, I beheld him for one brief moment, not as I saw him and as he saw these disgusting creatures around him, but as he still appeared in his own eyes, which even after all these centuries were not open to his true state, his real self. See, and he's saying what I just said. He thinks he looks good. I saw him as a haughty, handsome man with cruel, clear-cut features, hard expression, and eyes like a wild vulture, that withal possessing a certain beauty of form, a certain power to charm. All that was repulsive and vile was hidden by the earthly envelope, not revealed as now in all the nakedness of the spirit. So here this guy has great force of will, and he uses it for not good, right? He uses it for his own, whatever he wants, his own desires. Now, what's interesting, and this it tells you in the books by Jiva Owens, I talk about in my series of 3 books. The first one's Heaven and Below. Is the spiritual who will see a guy like this and go, oh, once he turns to the good, he's going to be a very powerful spirit. He's going to rise quickly. And so I've read this multiple places, and this shows you what the spirit world wants of us. They want someone with faith and force of will and intellectual curiosity. And this person, this emperor who sees himself handsome, yet his true look is pretty repulsive, but he has faith in himself. Now, when he replaces that faith in himself, to have faith in himself and in the goodness of God and Jesus, he'll still have that ability to marshal up his willpower, which will be a very good attribute in the spirit world. So remember that when you see someone just like, God, that person's horrible, but he's very effective. But know that that person someday will be effective for the good. Okay, let me carry on. I saw his court and his companions change back to the likeness of their earthly lives, and I knew that to each and all they appeared just as the same in their own eyes, and all were unconscious of their horrible change in themselves, yet perfectly conscious of the change in each of their companions. Were all unconscious? No, not quite all. There was one man crouching in a corner, his mantle drawn over his disfigured face, whom I perceived to be fully conscious of his own vileness, as well as the vileness of all who surrounded him. So there's one person that kind of, okay, the veil is kind of being pulled from my eyes. And in this man's heart there had sprung up a desire, hopeless as it seemed to himself, for better things, for a path to open before him, which, however hard and thorny, might lead him from this night of hell and give him, even at this 11th hour, the hope of a life removed from the horrors of this place and these associates. And as I looked, I knew it was to this man that I was sent, though how I was to help him I knew not. I could not guess. I only felt that the power which had led me so far would open up my path and show me the way. Now, notice Franchezzo's faith in that he would be shown the way. And he has this faith, not blind faith because someone said, hey, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. No, because of what he's experienced in the past. Because there's always spirits in touch with you. You may not know it because they're high spirits. And Franchezzo was not. He had probably not even been to the first level of heaven yet, or pretty close. But they would watch him. They would send inspiration to him. They would have other things happen. And the same way happens to us here in this life. We get inspiration. We have doors open. We have doors closed. And we just think it's, we're kind of like a kindergartner going through with our name tag, and people know, and didn't know why people know our name, right? Because we couldn't read yet. So, somehow we're the same way. So, and also look at his task is to help rescue a person. And this is, again, what we will be given when we go to heaven. We'll be given tasks. We'll go if we want to. Our free will is respected. We'll go to classes, but we'll be part of groups if we want, and go down to these areas and help people. And then each one of these things will teach us other things. Everything is for our edification. And we're not given tasks that we're going to completely fail at. And we'll always learn something, and it's made to be successful, just like your life on earth is made to be successful. It may not feel that way to you, because after all, me included, I'm, the biggest whiner when things go wrong. Hopefully I've gotten better, but that's why I try to learn not to do that, because it's like, oh, there's a reason for that. I wonder what that is. And then I think about it and go, oh my God, did I do that? Did I do that in a past life? What an idiot. That's how I think now. And I go, okay, I know not to do that anymore. So, let me carry on. While I had thus stood gazing around me, the dark spirits and the ruler became conscious of my presence, and a look of anger and curiosity passed over his face, while in a voice thick and hoarse with passion, he demanded who I was and how I dared to enter his presence. I answered, I am a stranger, only lately come to this dark sphere, and I am still lost in wonder at finding such a place in the spirit world. A wild, ferocious laugh broke from the spirit, and he cried out that they would soon enlighten me as to many things in the spirit world. But since you are a stranger, he continued, and because we always receive strangers right royally here, I pray you to be seated and partake with us of our feast. He pointed to a vacant seat at the long table in front of him, at which many of the spirits were seated, and which was spread with what bore the semblance of a great feast, such as might have been given in the days of his earthly grandeur. Everything looked real enough, but I have been warned that it was all more or less illusionary, and that the food never satisfied the awful cravings of hunger which these former gluttons felt, and that the wine was a fiery liquid which scorched the throat and rendered 1,000 times worse the thirst which consumed these drunkards. I had been told to neither eat nor drink anything offered me in these regions, nor to accept any invitation to rest myself given by these beings, for to do so would mean the subjugation of my higher powers to the senses once more, and would at once put me on more on a level with these dark beings and into their power. Now, why did they tell them that? Now, this is a good clue. So, he said that for to do so would mean the subjugation of my higher powers to the senses once more. So as he got himself out of the dark abyss, right out of hell, and instead of thinking about revenge or money or desires, sensuality, and those all pick and come from our more primitive emotions. Instead of thinking about service and love and fraternity and charity, which all come from our higher emotions. And if he started eating something, he would taste, even though it's supposed to be taste, bad, but he would start thinking with, oh, this taste, like, oh, I like this person, or this is like, this luxury is great. And he would start his since you are who you think you are, right? And you are who you are internally as far as externally, he would start forgetting his higher senses, right? His higher character, and he would go down a little bit. Now, if he's very powerful, he could probably eat and say, yeah, who cares? But he's just lately come out of that. And they're just trying to, it's like an alcoholic. It's like, oh, have a drink every once in a while. No, it's best not to touch it, right? Anyway, he said, I answered, why I fully appreciate the motives which prompt you to offer me the hospitality of your place. I still must decline it, as I have no desire to either eat or drink anything. At this rebuff, his eyes shot gleams of living fire at me, and a deep shade of anger across his brow. But he still maintained a pretense of graciousness, and signed to me to approach yet nearer to him. Meanwhile, the man whom I had come to help, aroused from his bitter meditations by my arrival and the emperor's speech with me, had drawn near in wonder at my boldness and alarm for my safety, for he knew no more of me than I seemed some unlucky new arrival who had not yet learned the dangers of this horrible place. His anxiety for me and a certain sense of pity created a link between us, which, unknown to either, was to be the means whereby I would be able to draw him away with me. When I advanced a few steps toward the emperor's throne, the repentant spirit followed me, and coming close whispered, do not be beguiled by him. Turn and fly from this place while there's still yet time, and I will draw their attention from you for the moment. I thanked the spirit, but said, I shall not fly from any man, be he whom he may, and will take care not to fall into any trap. Our hurried speech had not gone unnoticed by the emperor, for he became most impatient, and striking his sword upon the ground, he cried out to me, approach, stranger, have you no manners that you keep the emperor waiting? Behold my chair of state, my throne. Seat yourself in it, and try for a moment how it feels to be in an emperor's place. I looked at the throne as he pointed, and saw it was like a great chair with a canopy over it. Two immense winged figures in bronze stood at the back of the seat, each with 6 long arms extended to form the back and sides, while upon the heads of these figures the canopy rested upon pillars. I had no thought to sit in such a place. Its late occupant was too repulsive to me to desire to go any nearer to him. But had even curiosity made me wish to examine the chair, the sight I saw would have effectively prevented me. The chair seemed suddenly to become endowed with life, and before my eyes I beheld a vision of an unhappy spirit struggling in the embrace of those awful arms which encircled it, and crushed its body into a mangled, writhing mass. And I knew that such was the fate of all those whom the emperor induced to try the comfort of his chair. Only for one brief instant the vision lasted, and then I turned to the emperor and, bowing, said to him, so, now, this sounds fantastic, but the emperor can dominate this wonderfully ignorant, well, I wouldn't say ignorant, but kind of cruel person, had a lot of mental power to dominate others on his level or below. Higher spirit. Now, this was truly a higher spirit. Franchezzo's a little bit in danger, right? Because he may not be, but someone from the levels of heaven wouldn't even worry about that. He could do whatever they want. They would have absolutely no power. But for an emperor taking other people and making them meld into that chair, they can do that. I have read where they can say, oh, I want you to be a horse. And that way they can have a cavalry. So they'll have these ignorant spirits ride other spirits that will now in the shape of a horse. And also some of these really bad people will make people into the shape of furniture and then use them as furniture. So there's some bad things around here. Then he said, I have no desire to place myself upon your level and must again decline the honor you would do me. Then he broke into a tempest of rage and cried out to his guards to seize me and thrust me into that chair and pour the food and wine down my throat till they choked me. Immediately the rush toward me, the man I had come to save throwing himself before me to protect me. In a moment, we were surrounded by a seething, frightening mass of spirits, and for that moment, I confess my heart sank within me, and my courage began to fail. They looked so horrible, so fiendish, like a pack of wild beasts let loose and all setting upon me at once. Only for a moment, however, for the conflict aroused all my combative qualities of which I had been taught to possess my fair share. So even he's got will too, right? Franchezzo was no easygoing guy in any life. And I threw out all my will to repel them, calling upon all the good powers to aid me while I grasped firm hold of the poor spirit who had sought to help me. Thus I retreated to the door step by step, the whole crowd of dark spirits following us with wild cries and menacing gestures, yet unable to touch us, while I kept firm my determination to keep them off. At last we reached the door and passed through it, whereupon it seemed to close fast and keep in our pursuers. Then strong arms seemed to lift us both up and bear us away to a place of safety on the dark plain. So he had help there. Someone was watching him the whole time. So Franchezzo did a good job. My rescue companion was by this time in a state of unconsciousness, and as I stood by him, I saw four majestic spirits from the higher spheres making magnetic passes over his prostrate form, and then I beheld the most wonderful sight I had ever seen. From the dark, disfigured body, which lay as in a sleep of death, there arose a mist-like vapor, which grew more and more dense, till it took the shape and the form of the spirit himself, the purified soul of that poor spirit released from its dark envelope. And I saw those four angelic spirits lift the still unconscious risen soul in their arms as one would bear a child. And then they all floated away from me, up, till they vanished from my sight. At my side stood another bright angel who said to me, "Be of good cheer, O son of the land of hope, for many shalt thou help in this dark land, and great is the joy of the angels in heaven over these sinners that have repented." So, of course, this shows you Jesus and the whole legions that work for him. He's in command of all the layers of heaven, the lower zone, the dark abyss, the physical earth. He's the governor, right? He's the dean, the governor, he's everything. So all these people work for him, even though some don't know it, like these people, like the emperor. And so they knew that they sent him on this quest, or quest it was. Isn't it a marvelous quest to go down into the Imperial city and save souls? Isn't that like a dream many of us have? So then he said, oh, and as he finished speaking, he vanished, and I was alone once more on the bleak plains of hell. Okay, so that is the end of that chapter. So, I mean, these are great chapters. And there is just wonderfulness in this book, which is not a Spiritist book, but everything I've read so far, I mean, not everything, I shouldn't say that, but it's very close with Spiritism. As I read these things, I say what is probably a little bit of misconception versus what I've read from many sources. And a lot of the sources I read, I combine, and what I've done is I combine into this one book, and I've written 15 books, and I'll show other books later in a second, but the Spirit Realm, where I really try and explain the spirit universe, the physical universe, what we are as spirits, who we are as spirits, how we grow as spirits, what are we as incarnate human, right? What's our mission as human? How do we ascend as a human? How do we get better as a human? How we're guided, how the whole world is guided. So I think this is a good one to really look at once you've gotten a understanding. You can read this first if you want, but I would recommend first, I would recommend this book, which I have on my site. Let me bring this up. I would, if you're interested in Spiritism, I would go to this site, nwspiritism.com, and you'll see on the right-hand navigation bar, you will see Spiritism 101, and it's in PDF, so it's free. Now, of course, if you go down further, you'll see it in audio, Kindle, and paperback, if that's the way you want it. But it's totally free. And that's all. It's about 100 pages, I think. It's a very good summary of Spiritism, what it means, why we're on Earth, what they've revealed in the 1850s, who was Allan Kardec. Then I would recommend you read the Spirits book by Allan Kardec. Now, this book was codified. He's called the Great Codifier. It was codified in 1850s. And it was during the time of people did table rapping, right? You know, the spirits were rapping tables. And he thought, well, this can't be true. And he was part of that. And then he thought, oh, there's something going on here. I don't know what it is. And then there was also a part where they would get messages from people, right, as they became more sophisticated. And it seemed to be that everything was kind of frivolous until Allan Kardec showed up and things got serious with the spirits around him. Well, he went back and he said, okay. And he and his wife encouraged him and really helped him a lot. He wrote a series of 1,019 questions because I'm going to find out what's going on with the spirit world. I'm going to do a scientific analysis because he is a scientist. And what he did, though, he didn't just go back to this one medium. He gave the same questions to multiple mediums and didn't put them in this book unless they're the same or similar. And he wrote other books besides. You can find all his books on PDF. And they're marvelous. For those who are interested, who think you have mediumistic ability, that means you see or hear spirits or some sort of visions, I very earnestly recommend you read the Spirits book and then the Mediums book, which talks about the different types of spirits, different types of visions, how you can tell ignorant spirits from high spirits, what are the classifications of spirits. It's all there. And that's in my other books too, but it's all there. And I think it's important to learn because ignorant spirits can try to fool you. And of course, and that's why, people who are Catholic or Christian will come and say, well, you can't talk to spirits. And I say, I understand why the church and the religious organization says don't do that. Because it is a risk. But what Spiritism does is when there's a medium, they really, they'll go through a year, sometimes more of training, and then they'll always go around this table. And I've been part of the mediums meeting, not around the table, but there'll be 4 or 5 of them, right? And they will meet in the same place at the same time. Let's say Tuesdays at 7 o'clock. And they'll be trained and they'll have more experienced people with them. But then also the fact that they meet at the same place at the same time, there are higher spirits that will protect the room from other spirits coming in. And there will also be the ones that will pick the spirits will come in and talk to mediums. And you may ask, well, why can't these high spirits talk to these spirits? And that's a good question. And that's because it's the same way as some kids really only want to talk to other kids. Even though the adult knows the answer, they won't listen to you because, after all, you're not the same as they are. And I've seen this in action, and where people, and they just have to feel that human connection. A lot of times because some of them don't even know that they have passed over. And they have to feel that human connection, and then they have to talk to someone, and then they go, oh, I'm really dead. I mean, I've heard this. People don't know. It's amazing. It shows you the mundane secret is that you are who you are when you're alive and when you're dead. Now, and that's why you want to understand this. Now, a lot of people say, well, Brian, you're talking about spirits and the other world, and science says all of this is bunk. Well, and I completely understand. And the reason why I believe this is because what happened to me that science cannot explain. Because I had things told to me. My wife has these visions, well, I think 10, 15 years before, I always forget how long, before we were married. And then she told me what she saw. And I didn't believe her at all until she became very specific. And things happened specifically It may have been possible, but certainly not at all in the realms of probability. And that probably is saying, okay, if someone can tell me my future with specificity, then someone is controlling our destiny. And therefore, we're not just these carbon-based human elements that randomly are born and then go away into dust. No. And I think we've gone through, and what spirits have told us, we're going through a very materialistic age, which is all planned because we're supposed to technologically, I can't pronounce it tonight, advance. But then we're also supposed to supplement that with our spiritual advancement. So that's why it's important. And so this is why, again, I will say that I think this is a good book to read. And then you can get further into some of my other books that will start showing you the more specific things and go into greater detail, like a series of 3 books I have, Heaven and Below. Book 1, The Spirit World Revealed to an Anglican Vicar. Of course, this is an Audible, paperback and Kindle. And then the second book is Spirits in the Spirit Universe. And the third book in the series is How We're Guided by Spirit. So I'm hoping, so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to lay this information out for you to understand what's really happening to you. Because what our current culture tells us is that we should grab whatever we want. We don't care about anybody's feelings. And if we don't have that latest yacht, vacation house, or tennis shoes, or car, we're losers. Well, I got news for you. No, it's your level of spirituality. There are many people here on earth that are the big winners, and we don't even know them, right? Because your life on earth is just a short, tiny little span. Remember, you're an immortal spirit. You will never die. You will never grow old in the spirit world. You will look good, and you'll look as you think you should look. And if you have any disability, it's probably given to you because they wanted to limit you in some way to make your trials and tribulations here on earth more efficient. And then just think of what I said, trials and tribulation on earth. Think of the planning, the immense planning that is involved in making sure that you're getting your life with these other people, all these intersections. And of course, then I also talk about in this book, How to Live Inner Peace Through Spiritism, is how you improve yourself. Because I am firm in my conviction that the more you understand why you're here, what's happening to you, what's your past and what's your future, and you look at your life as this big learning experience, your stress level just decreases. I'm still not perfect. I'm far from it. I still get upset and things like that, but a lot less than I used to, because I know these things that we go through are all for a purpose. It's for our own edification. So anyway, I want to say thank you for everyone who's been with me tonight.